Feels like the world's moving at warp speed these days, Like
Yeah.
everything's changing at once, how countries do business with each other, tech that seems like it's straight out of science fiction, and big power plays happening all over the globe.
Yeah. It's a lot to keep up with.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We've got this article, Liberation Day, Flying Cars in China, Mega Dams and Trump's Tariff Gamble, and it is a wild ride. Our mission to break down how all these things, economic policy, tech, and geopolitics, are all connected just for you.
It's like this isn't just about reading headlines. We're talking flying cars, possible trade wars, even a dam so big it can actually mess with the Earth's rotation. Just a little.
Yeah, no, that's a lot.
We want to make sure you get the big picture without getting lost in the weeds.
All right, well, let's jump right in then. Liberation Day. That's the first thing that grabbed my attention. Sounds pretty intense. It's all about Trump's push for these reciprocal tariffs. Can you bring that down for us? What's the deal with that?
Sure. So reciprocal tariffs, at their core, they're like a tool, right? The U.S. uses them to address what they see as unfair trade practices. The gist is this. If another country, let's say, slaps a tax on stuff coming in from the U.S. will basically do the same thing back. They'll put a similar tax, maybe even a smaller one, on goods coming in from that country.
So it's like a tit for tat kind of thing.
Exactly. It's meant to be a way of pushing back against countries that the U.S. feels aren't playing fair when it comes to trade.
Okay, so like level the playing field, kind of?
You got it. But historically, and this is important, reciprocal tariffs, they can sometimes spark these back and forth retaliations.
Oh, so it can escalate quickly.
Yeah. And those can end up meaning higher prices for everyone and fewer choices for consumers, like less stuff on the shelves, basically.
So what's the thinking behind this then? Like, what's the driving force behind this idea that's such a key part of Trump's economic policy?
Well, the argument, and we've heard this before, is that globalization, the way it's happened, hasn't really benefited the American economy. It's actually hurt it.
Okay.
The feeling is that American jobs, especially in manufacturing, have moved overseas, right? And it's made the U.S. dependent on countries that maybe don't always have America's best interests at heart, like China is the big example there.
Makes sense.
The goal here, the big goal, is to reverse that, to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., especially in those high-tech areas
Yeah.
that are seen as so crucial to the economy and national security in the future. Things like, drone production.
So bring back those American factories. Okay, but is this like a universally loved idea? Like even within the Republican Party, is everyone on board with this?
Not exactly. There's
Yeah.
definitely some pushback, even among Republicans. The concern is that, tariffs could escalate into these full-blown trade wars.
Right.
And we know those can be bad news for everyone involved.
Yeah.
And then there's the inflation worry, right? If it costs more to get stuff into the U.S., those costs are probably going to get passed down to consumers.
Right, makes sense. Higher prices on everything. Okay, now the article makes this pretty interesting analogy, comparing the reliance on cheap imports to that whole let them eat cake thing.
Yeah.
What's the connection there?
It is an interesting comparison. So the let them eat cake quote, whether it's true or not, it represents this disconnect between the super wealthy and the struggles of everyday people. And the parallel here is that, yeah, maybe American consumers love getting those cheaper products from overseas, but what's the hidden cost, right?
Right.
Is it American jobs? Is it weakening our own industries? The article even uses this term, economic dignity.
Interesting.
It's saying it's not just about saving a few bucks on a T-shirt or whatever. It's about this bigger idea of economic independence and being able to stand on our own 2 feet.
Okay, so like a long-term vision versus just like the instant gratification of getting a cheap product.
Exactly.
So it's about the big picture. And that kind of leads us to this next point the article makes about tariffs actually being a national security issue. It feels like we're moving beyond just economics here.
For sure. It's a whole different level. The worry is that if we're relying too much on manufacturing from countries that could become, rivals or even adversaries, that puts us in a vulnerable position. And this is especially true for industries that are vital for national defense. The article uses drone technology as a prime example, and that's a big one. If we're dependent on China for essential parts of our drones, that gives them leverage.
Leverage in what sense?
Well, think about it. In a conflict, they could just cut us off. No more parts. And that could cripple our ability to use those technologies.
Okay, so it's about not having all our eggs in one basket, basically.
Exactly.
The article makes a pretty stark comparison to drive home that point, right?
Yeah. They bring up Israel's ability to control Gaza's power supply. It's a bit of a disturbing example, but it gets the point across. The idea is that China could do something similar, just cut off the flow of essential goods, and that would have a huge impact on the U.S.
Right. So it's about protecting ourselves in the long run. So with all this, potential for disruption, how have Trump's allies been handling this whole thing? Like, how are they selling it to the public?
Well, the article points to some key figures like J.D. Vance and Howard Lutnick. They're really trying to shape the narrative and calm any fears about these tariffs.
Okay, let's start with J.D. Vance. What's his take on why these tariffs are actually a good thing?
Vance is doing two things. First, he's pushing back against that whole inflation worry. Remember how we talked about the concern that tariffs would lead to higher prices?
Yeah?
Well, he's saying, look, when we had similar tariffs during Trump's previous term, inflation wasn't a big problem. In fact, the economy actually grew.
Okay, so he's using past experience as an example.
Right. And his second point is basically shifting the blame. He's pointing the finger at the Biden administration for any current economic struggles, not the tariffs.
So he's saying this isn't a tariff problem, it's a Biden problem.
Exactly. But he also said something else that caused quite a stir. He made this comment about Americans basically borrowing from Chinese peasants to buy their goods.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Didn't go over very well.
No, not at all. It was really controversial. Some people saw it as inflammatory, even a bit offensive.
Yeah, you can see how that would rub people the wrong way.
But it really highlights the narrative he's trying to build, this idea that America is too dependent on China and that it's time to challenge that.
Okay, so that's J.D. Vance's side of things. Now, what about Howard Lutnick? He's coming at this from more of a business perspective, right?
Right. Lutnick's argument is all about the bottom line. He says these tariffs will force companies that currently produce overseas to make a choice, either move those factories to the U.S. or figure out a different way to do business to avoid those extra costs.
So he's betting on these tariffs pushing companies to bring jobs back to America.
Exactly. He's even predicting some huge numbers, like significant GDP growth and tons of new high-paying jobs. He throws out a figure of $5 trillion in new investments in American factories. It's a very optimistic view of what could happen if manufacturing really comes back to the U.S.
So two very different approaches, but both ultimately in support of these tariffs. Okay, the article then dives into the whole complex world of global trade and currency manipulation. It's not just about tariffs, is it? There's this whole other layer of stuff going on.
Right. Tariffs aren't happening in a vacuum. There are all these other factors, and currency manipulation is a big one. Countries like China have, in the past, been accused of intentionally lowering the value of their currency.
Okay, so why would they do that? What's the benefit of that?
Think of it this way. If they make their currency weaker, their products automatically become cheaper for buyers in other countries. It's like an instant discount on everything they sell internationally. And that gives them a big advantage in the global marketplace.
Makes sense. So how do tariffs fit into this whole currency game then?
Tariffs can be a way to counteract that price advantage that comes from devaluing the currency. It's kind of like evening the score. For example, if a country weakens its currency by, say, 10%, making its goods cheaper for other countries to buy, a 10% tariff on those goods could essentially cancel that out.
So it neutralizes that price advantage.
Right. And in some cases, tariffs might even force the exporter to lower their prices even further to stay competitive, even with that added tariff cost.
So it's like a constant tug of war.
Exactly.
Now, the article mentions this math war involving Trump. Apparently, he was throwing around some pretty complex economic terms and symbols. What was that all about?
Ah, yes, the math war. The article talks about how Trump would sometimes use these really complex-looking economic equations and symbols when talking about trade, things like mu and sigma. You know, the kind of stuff you'd see in a textbook.
Right, like trying to sound really smart, basically.
Yeah, kind of. It was like he was trying to show that he had this deep, super sophisticated understanding of all these economic forces. But the result, according to the article, was often more confusion than anything else.
Like people just didn't get it.
Right, because these terms weren't really explained in a way that connected them to the actual trade policy. So it's a lot of complexity without a lot of clarity.
Okay, well, let's shift gears now because this is where things get really interesting. The article jumps into these amazing technological advancements happening in China. I mean, we're talking actual flying cars, right?
Yeah, we're talking flying cars. And not just prototypes, but actual fleets of these electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. They call them eVTOLs for short.
eVTOL, so like the Jetsons, but in real life. And it's actually happening in China, not just like some sci-fi movie set.
It's pretty remarkable. It suggests that China might be leading the way in this whole new era of urban transportation. It makes you wonder what kind of infrastructure and regulations they have in place to support something like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not just flying cars either, right? The article also talks about some really big advancements in AI and remote surgery.
This is where things get really futuristic. The progress they've made with AI-assisted remote surgeries could revolutionize healthcare. Imagine a highly skilled surgeon can operate on someone thousands of miles away using AI to enhance their skills and precision.
That's wild. It's like something out of Star Trek.
It really is. This blend of human expertise and machine power could bring specialized medical care to places that don't have it right now, and it could lead to better outcomes for patients everywhere.
It's hard to wrap your head around the possibilities. Okay, so from flying cars to robotic surgery, China's clearly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. But then we have these mega dam projects, and those aren't just about generating electricity, are they?
Not at all. China's already built dams so big they can actually have a measurable effect on the planet. The article mentions the Three Gorges Dam. It's so massive, the weight of the water it holds back has slightly slowed down the Earth's rotation.
Wait, seriously? Like it's changed the Earth's rotation?
Yeah, just a tiny bit. It's a mind-blowing feat of engineering.
And now they're building an even bigger one.
That's right, even larger. And the article says this could have even bigger impacts on the planet. The video they reference even said that the Three Gorges Dam basically added time to the year, although it's such a tiny amount we wouldn't even notice it.
That's incredible. It's hard to even imagine the scale of something like that.
It's a whole other level. So you can see how these projects aren't just about power generation. They're a statement about ambition and pushing the limits of what's possible.
It's almost like they're playing with forces of nature. Okay, so we have all this amazing progress happening, but the article also points out some potential problems, like the struggles Tesla's having and how much the price of video games has gone up. How do those things fit into the bigger picture?
Well, those might be signs of some broader economic issues. Tesla's having trouble selling cars, and their stock is down. That could mean demand for electric vehicles is slowing down, or it could be a sign that people are being more cautious with their money in general.
Okay, so maybe a sign that the economy isn't as strong as it could be.
Possibly. And then you have video games going up to $80 a pop. That's a pretty big jump.
Yeah, that's a lot for a video game.
Right. And that could be an early sign of something called stagflation. Basically, it's when you have a stagnant economy, meaning it's not growing much, but prices are still going up.
So everything costs more, but people aren't making more money.
Exactly. It's a tough situation for everyone.
So we've got a lot of mixed signals here. On the one hand, you have these amazing technological advancements, but on the other, you have these potential economic warning signs. The article calls this a collision of global shifts. It even suggests we might be heading towards a new Cold War and a global economic reset. Those are pretty heavy statements.
They are. But when you step back and look at everything together, all these things are connected. You have the growing tension between the U.S. and China, driven by economics, technology, and national security concerns. That definitely has some echoes of the Cold War.
Right, like a new kind of rivalry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the idea of a global economic reset comes from all the disruptions we're seeing. The way countries' trade is changing, technology is changing everything at lightning speed, and the global balance of power is shifting. It's a lot of uncertainty. And the article really highlights the big choices that the U.S. and other countries are facing right now. Do we keep going with globalization, or do we take a more nationalist approach, focusing more on ourselves?
So a real fork in the road. And in all of this, the article paints China as more than just a competitor, right? It's like they're shaping the future, and not just with technology and economics. It's like they're impacting the planet itself.
Exactly. The things they're doing, from flying cars to these mega dams that can literally change the Earth's rotation, it's clear they're a major force in the world. It's a big shift in global power, and we all need to be aware of it.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. Everything from trade wars and flying cars to these incredible engineering feats that are changing the planet. It's a lot to think about, but hopefully you, our listener, have a better understanding of what's going on in the world and how all these things are connected.
Absolutely. We've explored economic nationalism, the rapid pace of technological change, and the major shifts happening in the global power structure. It's all connected.
And that brings us to our final thought for you. Given everything we've discussed today, what do you think will have the biggest impact on the future? The changes in global trade, the incredible new technologies, or the shifting balance of power between countries? It's a big question, but it's one worth thinking about.
It really is. And we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening.